Hello! Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And here is my spoiler-free review of Lilo and Stitch, the latest live-action adaptation of a Disney classic. The original movie came out in 2002, and I just never got around to watching it. I've never seen the original movie, Lilo and Stitch. And for those of you now that have been following me for a while will know sort of where I sit when it comes to these live action adaptations of these Disney classics. Like, I'm not a massive fan of them. They lack a purpose. They lack a reason to exist. Like, they don't really add anything new. They're just trying to sort of replicate sort of the animated versions, and I just don't get that. I really don't understand it. But when it comes to Lilo and Stitch, I've never seen that original movie. I don't have that emotional attachment to that original film. But anyway, Lilo and Stitch. It's directed by a Dean Fleischer camp, who also directed Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And it's a movie that I heard a lot of good things about. I just never got around to checking it out. And so he directs here this live action adaptation of Lilo and Stitch. So the story follows Experiment 626, a genetically engineered alien who escapes captivity and crash lands in Hawaii, where he's adopted by a Lilo, a lonely girl struggling with her family situation. As Lilo teaches Stitch about family, he must evade capture by a Dr. Jumba Chukiba and Agent Palikli, who have been sent to retrieve him. So, I went into this movie blind. I purposely decided not to watch the original movie. I wanted this particular experience to be an experience that wasn't tainted by what's come before. And what I want to start off with saying is, straight away, as the movie starts, there's this kind of very high energy there that's driving this narrative forward. And that comes with a couple of negatives and a couple of positives for me. Like, for example, when it comes to the positives, as a whole, when it comes to the pacing and that sort of high energy that is driving that narrative forward, like, this is a movie that it doesn't stop. And it's very consistent with that. It works as a whole. And at the same time, this movie is aimed towards a young audience. It's aimed towards kids. So I feel like as a result of that high energy, I feel like kids are going to be locked in for the entire duration of this experience. But when it comes to sort of the negatives I had with that, even though, technically it works. I mean, it was very consistent with its pacing and how the narrative flowed. At the same time, it kind of affected sort of the big beating heart of its story. And, that is, the movie does still have these kind of moments, these kind of very somber, tender moments between its characters. Whether it be Lilo and her sister, Nani, or Lilo and Stitch, you have these kind of very kind of emotional moments that I really like. They really, and they are very effective. For example, there's this beautiful moment where Lilo is praying at the window where she sees this, what she thinks is a shooting star. And the movie is full of these moments that are dotted throughout. But due to sort of the high energy that is driving the narrative forward, I just feel like it sometimes loses focus on the sort of the character's journey and sort of these characters' sort of personal sort of journeys and they kind of the relationship between the characters. For example, Lilo and Stitch, I just feel like that kind of relationship that forms with these two characters and sort of that journey that they're on, it sometimes gets lost due to sort of the chaoticness and that kind of high energy behind what's driving the narrative. The pulse is always there. You always feel the heart, but it sometimes just kind of loses focus on it. It sometimes becomes a little too faint. And so by the time we get to the movie's conclusion, it kind of lacks the emotional thud that I was hoping for. It's almost like it doesn't really allow, or we're sort of missing moments when it comes to sort of the growth of these characters' relationships and their sort of their journey throughout this experience. It's like sometimes we are missing a beat, you could say, when it comes to these journeys with these characters and their relationships. It's kind of there, but they almost feel like moments that are shoehorned into sort of the chaoticness of its story. At the same time, it still sort of works as this kind of one this one experience, and I think kids are never going to find it dull. I mean, I don't think kids are going to find a dull moment. I think they're always going to be locked in due to sort of how they approached sort of the narrative here, that kind of the high energy that's driving the narrative. But for me, that kind of the big beating heart that is there within this story, that pulse does sometimes become a little bit faint as a result, and it did affect sort of how the story wraps up with these characters. At the same time, I found this experience to be a very pleasant one. I liked it. It was okay. I really dug the score by Dan Roma. I feel like his score does a beautiful job at conveying and capturing what these characters are going through emotionally, what these characters are feeling, and it sort of really elevates those kind of more somber, tender moments with these characters, whether it be Lilo and Nani or Lilo and Stitch. When it comes to those moments, I think the score does a beautiful job at sort of capturing and kind of conveying what sort of the characters are going through, and that kind of the emotional sort of aspect, that kind of big beating heart of its story. It does a really good job at really capturing that and bringing that aspect of the experience to life in a way that kind of really allowed me to get sort of emotionally invested into this story to a degree, even though, I have minor issues. I have sort of issues with how that kind of the story of these characters, of Lilo and Stitch, and sort of their relationship and how that kind of grows through the story. Even though I have minor issues with that aspect, there are other elements to how the story is crafted, like the music, that keeps me emotionally engaged to some degree. And I just like how these characters' sort of backgrounds and these stories and where they're at in life, you don't get a lot of these moments that are just exposition filled. Like, a lot of it is alluded to, a lot of it is through visuals, through where you might get a character looking at something. And I really dig that. I really dig that approach when it comes to telling character stories. I don't like everything just sort of being told to you, within these moments that are purposely designed to be for exposition. And so, I kind of really appreciated that aspect of the story, of this experience. The strongest aspect within this movie for me, and that is because this is an aspect to the movie which I feel like allowed me to be as engaged with the movie as I was. Because overall, this was a fine experience. I had minor issues here and there, but also those minor issues played into its positives. And I just do feel like that kind of the big beating pulse, that big beating heart that is there in the movie, it just kind of gets lost. And so when we get to the conclusion, it doesn't sort of land the thud that I felt like they were hoping for. With me, it does anyway, personally. But I feel like the reason why I was always sort of compelled and engaged with this experience was purely down to the performances from its two main lead stars. That being, and I'm going to try and pronounce these names, so apologies if I pronounce them incorrectly, and that is Maia, Kealoha, and Sydney Agudong, who play Lilo and Nani, these two sisters. Their performances here are incredible. Maia, who is a child actor, I could not get over sort of how authentic her performance was at bringing this character to life. There's a kind of a groundedness to the performance that I just found myself being really compelled by. And it's as a result of both Maia and Sydney, bringing these characters to life. There is a weight there. There's an authenticness to bringing these characters to life. and you kind of feel through their performances the pain that they're going through. It feels real. It feels grounded in this otherwise very fantasy-like story, this kind of very chaotic, energy-filled story. It's these performances that allow the story, the overall experience, to kind of have this kind of grounded feel to it. And I was, as a result of the performances, always engaged with the experience. So there's another aspect to this movie that kind of work but kind of doesn't, and I think they nailed it with a certain character, but then when it comes to the other characters they didn't. And that is, and some of you are gonna probably think that I'm petty here with this, so I don't want to sort of dwell on it too much, but it is the choice of style of animation that they use to bring the creatures to life. Now when it comes to Stitch, I think they nailed it. I think there's a nice balance there of bringing something into the real world. Like, look, this is a live action adaptation, and I don't want it to sort of look like or resemble Roger Rabbit, for example. Do you know what I mean? Where you've got an animated character, obviously, in the real world. You know, there has to be something that brings this character to life in a way that feels tangible, that it feels real, but also retain the essence of sort of the original character from that animated movie. And I think they nail that when it comes to Stitch. But when it comes to the other alien characters, the spaceship and sort of all of that, so the more fantastical element of the story, the more fantastical settings, it all just felt a little bit too cartoon-like, a little bit too CGI. And that might be petty. I mean, and it might just be me. I mean, this is just, at the end of the day, it's my own personal preference. But I felt like they nailed it with Stitch, but for me, it didn't quite work when it came to the other characters. And that might just be me. I don't know if it isn't. Or if it is, you know, let me know below in the comments and, you know, let's get a discussion going. But for me personally, I just, the sort of the style of animation that they chose to bring the more fantastical elements to life didn't always work for me. At the same time, I get it. You know, they do it. You've still got to try and capture that essence and sort of the soul, basically, of that original movie. Something they failed miserably at when it comes to the Lion King remake. I'm not sure whether it's worked here because I've never seen the original movie, but that was a little bit of a frustration of mine when it came to the style of animation in bringing a majority of the more fantastical elements to life. But they nailed it with Stitch. Like, I liked how Stitch looked. It felt like it was there existing. In fact, when it comes to sort of the CGI and the special effects within this movie, the movie's tone and its sort of approach to sort of bringing the bad guys to life, you could say, that are chasing after Stitch, it kind of reminded me an awful lot of my favourite Martian from 1999. I'm not sure if any of you guys are familiar with that movie, but it really took me back to sort of that kind of the late 90s, you could say, early 2000s kind of approach to these movies. And my favourite Martian was one of those movies that kind of really came to my mind when I was watching this. It really sort of kind of took me back to the late 90s watching that film, and it kind of, I felt like, captures that tone. And if that's what they're going for aesthetically and with its tone, then great, I think they've achieved that. So yeah, Lilo and Stitch for me was a pleasant experience. It was okay. I liked it. I didn't love it. It didn't quite sort of land sort of the thud that I really kind of hoped it would. But at the same time, I had a pleasant experience. For the most part, I was there with these characters. I was engaged on some level. And maybe a lot of that is down to the fact that I don't have that emotional attachment to the original movie, maybe. I don't know. But as a whole, it's a solid experience. It does work. Like, a lot of the issues I had, I feel are more sort of just my own kind of personal preferences. You know, as one overall experience, I liked it. It's definitely one of Disney's better live action remakes. At the same time, you know, for example, there is a heart there, but it doesn't always retain that heart. You know, there isn't this sort of one consistent pulse running throughout the story that kind of concludes with this big emotional thud. And maybe that's because it is just a little too energetic, sort of with its sort of narrative and how it, you know, with a high energy that does drive the narrative. For me personally, it does somewhat lose focus of that heart in moments. In fact, I'd say at one point I was kind of missing Stitch. You know, I felt like I wanted more Stitch. You know, it felt like I just really wanted a little bit more Lilo and Stitch. I felt like their relationship and how their relationship was growing on this journey sometimes felt like it was missing a moment, like it was missing a beat, you could say, in sort of the heart of its story. But it's a movie that I feel like it's going to work for a lot of people, especially towards the demographic that is aimed towards, being kids. I think the movie is engineered, it's designed in a way in how it flows with its narrative. I think kids are going to always remain locked in. Like, there were a lot of kids at my showing and they were having a blast with this. They seemed to be entertained right throughout. They were interacting with the movie. And so I think it's going to be very effective for a lot of people, especially those that it's aimed towards. And it's definitely made me want to check out that original movie now. I'm going to try and catch that original film soon and just sort of compare it and just see sort of what it is they have maybe changed and whatnot. But going into this movie blind, experiencing it, it was a pleasant one. I definitely think, without a doubt, it's one of Disney's better live-action remakes, but maybe that's because my vision hasn't been tainted yet by what came before, by that original movie, because I do sort of, you know, when it comes to these live-action remakes, I think they completely miss the point, or sort of miss why, you know, there should be a remake. Like, if you're going to remake something, it needs to improve on what's come before. It needs to create somewhat, you know, retain what that experience was, but add something to it. Maybe a perspective, a different perspective. But it needs to have a reason to exist. Not just recreate something shot for the sake of, you know, just money, for example. And that's what a lot of these live action remakes have felt to me. They've lacked the soul and the magic of what made those original movies special. But with this one, I can't compare it. And like I said, I had a pleasant time with it. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Lilo and Stitch, and I will be giving Lilo and Stitch my thoughts on Lilo and Stitch. But what did you guys think? Are you fans of the original movie? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I do plan on Wes Anderson's latest being my next movie review, that being the Phoenician Scheme. I'm looking forward to checking that out. I am a little behind at the moment with catching up on movies. I do have the third episode in my retro review series on the way, and that is for 1960s The Lost World. And I hit 500 subscribers last week, and I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone that have supported the channel. Whether it be liking, commenting, subscribing, it means an awful lot. It will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV. But it means the world. I absolutely love doing this. So yeah, that's enough rambling on from me. That's it from me for now. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.